הערב הזה נועד עבורכם הורים לילדים חולי אפילפסיה, שמעוניינים להעמיק את הידע שלהם בנושא הדיאטה הקטוגנית. ונמצאים איתנו הערב הורים שכבר מיישמים את הדיאטה, וגם הורים שאולי עדיין מתלבטים. מטרת הערב היא באמת לאפשר לכם להיפגש ביניכם, לפגוש משפחות נוספות מכל רחבי הארץ, להכיר ולשתף. אנחנו יודעים שהדיאטה הקטוגנית מלווה בקשיים רבים, החל מהרכב הדיאטה, מהמגבלות התזונתיות הרבות שחלות על הילדים, וכן מבחינת היישום שלה. בערב הזה נועד לנסות ולתת לכם מענה על הקשיים שאתם נתקלים בהם. הערב יכלול הרצאה של דוקטור קוסוף, סיפורים אישיים של שתי משפחות, בפאנל מומחים שייתן לכם באמת את ההזדמנות לשאול את כל העולה על לבכם ולקבל מענה מקצועי. אנחנו מאוד מאוד מבקשים לרשום לעצמכם את כל השאלות שעולות במהלך הערב, ולא לשאול במהלך הערב, אלא באמת רק בפאנל. דבר נוסף, לפני שאנחנו מתחילים, אני מאוד שמחה להציג בפניכם, אני מקווה שאתם רואים את הספר היומן הקטוגני שלי. הספר הזה הוא תוצר של שיתוף פעולה פורה בין חברת מגה לבין שתי משפחות מקסימות, משפחת ברגר, טלי ואלי. ומשפחת זובריצקי, יולה, אימא של שני. בנוסף, אני מאוד רוצה להודות לחברת נוטרישיה העולמית, שהנציג שלה ג'ם 200 נמצא איתנו פה הערב. חברת נוטרישיה זו החברה שמייצרת את הקטוקל, מוצר שנחקר רבות ונמצא כיעיל בטיפול בפרפוסים. מטרת הספר היא ללוות את הטיפול התזונתי בדיאטה קטוגנית ולהוות לכם איזשהו כלי עזר. הוא מכיל בין השאר מתכונים בשילוב עם קטוקל וטיפים שונים שאנחנו מקווים שיקלו עליכם ועל ילדים שלכם לצלוח בקלות עד כמה שאפשר את הדיאטה ובאמת לנסות ולהתמיד בה לאורך זמן. את הספר יהיה ניתן לקבל אך ורק אצל הדיאטנית המטפלת שלכם ולא בשום צורה אחרת. רק הדיאטנית שלכם תוכל באמת לעזור לכם לשלב את המתכונים שבו בצורה יעילה ובטוחה בתפריט היומי של הילד. אז אנחנו מאחלים לכם באמת ערב פורה ונעים, ואני רוצה להזמין את דוקטור קוסוף ואת זהבה שידברו על הטיפולים התזונתיים באפילפסיה.
Yes. Thank you, Ronnie. It's really my honor and pleasure to be here in Israel. It's been a great trip so far, and we're really happy to speak to parents. Very often, this morning we spoke to some doctors, and doctors often, they nod, they say yes, but parents always ask the tough questions. So it's good, and it's sometimes hard for us, but it's excellent for us to hear from parents who really are living this diet and explain to us and ask really the questions that are really important. So I'd like to thank you again for inviting us. We're going to trade off, so I'll speak and then Zahava will speak, and we'll go back and forth a little bit to give you an overview of how we do the diet and sort of where science is going and really where maybe the future is going for these diets. And if something's not clear, let me know. Both Zahava and I are both from New York, so we tend to talk fast. But right now we're in Baltimore. People been to Baltimore, Maryland? No, there's somebody from Baltimore. One. So this is Baltimore, taken from a Southwest Airlines flight. Kind of see the inner harbor over there. It's a little bit cooler here than Tel Aviv, but still nice weather. We're entering our summer. Lots of nice things, fun things to do in Baltimore. This is my unfortunate sick hobby, mountain biking on the left. I tend to do a lot of that. There's great places to do that in Baltimore. That on the top right is the Inner Harbor, sort of the touristy part of Baltimore. Anyone know where that is on the right? It's not soccer. So that's the American football team. That's the Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens. Good football. This is Johns Hopkins. This is where Zahava and I spend probably way too much time. That's the old historic part of the hospital on the left. And there's sort of part of the children's center, the current, about to be actually new children's center on the right. City of Baltimore in the distance. That's my family. I'll show my family. My son is much more attractive than I am. My wife and my daughter. We're home right now, very jealous. I'm here in Israel. This is my second trip. I came here 4 years ago. I had the pleasure of lecturing then, and had a nice tour and a good time as we had decided. That's my daughter. Anybody from America loves Israel. This was at an Israeli Appreciation Festival that was held in Baltimore. You can see all the blue and white balloons, and that's my daughter there as well. And again, of course, I'd like to thank Ellie and Tali for inviting us. They've done an amazing job with Oliver's Magic Diet. And really, parent support groups like this are really, I think, what gets families on the diet. They've done a super job, and it was very nice to meet them in Edinburgh. And back then, when we met them, both Zahava and I, Tali said, "We're going to bring you to Israel." And we said, "Okay." There it happens, and here we are. So, again, thank you. So, when we see children for epilepsy, and I see many, many children for epilepsy, what do we usually do? So we often say, look, let's try medicines. So why do we do that? Well, the medicines work. So in about 70% of children, the first medicine you pick is very successful. These children come back and see us every once in a while, and then we take them off their medicines, and they do great. And sometimes you have to go to a second medicine if that doesn't work. But there are definitely children who, despite multiple medications, don't respond to epilepsy. And it's still today somewhat sad that families that come see us say, we've been told there are no other options. And we tell them, actually, there are 4 other options. And so the 4 major therapies available in the world for epilepsy are medications. The bottom left is surgery. So if a child has a focal lesion that you can do surgery on, we're all trained as neurologists very early in our training, always think about surgery. In fact, it's almost a public health issue in the United States. They say if surgery is an option, get them to a center that can do surgery and cure the child. But there are certainly some children who are not candidates for surgery. It's not a feasible option, or the parents choose not to go down that road. And then the 2 other major options on the right are the VNS, or vagus nerve stimulator, using electricity to stop seizures. And then lastly, using dietary therapy to help stop seizures on the bottom right. How long has it been around, doctors? Everybody know? Close. 80 years. So a long time. So if you go back and you look in the medical literature, why? Show this. So maybe even back Adam and Eve knew about the ketogenic diet. So there were 3 dates, 3 important dates. The first one we're going to talk about in the history of the diet. We'll give you a little history lesson, which is, I think, important to learn where the diet's come, and sort of it's come full circle in popularity, was on 1921, July 21st. The second very important date, 1993, November 17th, and then more recently on April 2nd. So we'll talk about these 3 days, very critical days in the history of the diet. So 1921 was actually the first time the ketogenic diet was created. People think it was done at Johns Hopkins. It's not true. It was actually done at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, where there had actually been reports going back maybe 20 years before that of water diets being helpful, but not something you could maintain for long periods of time. And so back in 1921, a physician who actually was working with diabetes said, you know, if you're on a high-fat, low-carb diet, your body would be similar to if you were on a water diet, causing a starvation-type situation, but you could be on this with calories indefinitely. And so this was 1921, and at the time there were very few other treatments available for epilepsy, only 2, phenobarbital and bromides. And so when this came out in 1921, incredible interest. Adults, children, all ages were being tried on the diet. Very exciting time. Lots of articles being published about the diet. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, what changed was medicines. So really medicines rapidly started coming on the market, 1940s, 1950s, things changed. This was actually an article, one of the very first ads for Dilantin or phenatone. And you can see here, there's sort of the implication that now we can do something. That maybe the diet wasn't anything, but now we can change things. And the damage was sort of done. At that point, people said, look, this diet is expensive, it's too hard to do, we've got cures, we're in the modern era, why are we doing this old-fashioned diet? And so for about 60 years, the diet was not very well looked on by neurologists in the United States. It was not felt to be a very good option for children. It was done in very select centers in the United States, really only as a last resort. And then things changed on the second most important date in history, I think, personally, for the ketogenic diet, which was November 17, 1993. So that was the day that we admitted at Johns Hopkins a boy named Charlie, who I show on the right. And Charlie was about 18 months old. Charlie had intractable seizures, had failed about 6 medications, had partial surgery, it hadn't helped. The family reached out, asked their neurologist what other choices. They said more drugs. The family actually went and did some research on their own, found out about the diet, contacted Dr. John Freeman on the left, and Millie Kelly, who was his dietitian at the time, at Johns Hopkins, where I was as a trainee. And they said, sure, come to Hopkins, we can try the diet, it makes sense to use. And their neurologist didn't encourage them to do that. And so Charlie came to see us. This is actually from his discharge summary, the report, where they say after the ketogenic diet was started, Charlie did well, began to show a decrease in the amount of seizures. By the time of discharge, the patient had had no seizures for several days. So a wonderful, very quick response, which we do sometimes see that quick a response. And so this was, again, a child who had failed multiple medications, having hundreds of daily seizures. The diet stopped it within a week. So it turned out, as you'd expect, his father was quite angry. His father was upset that he was not told about the ketogenic diet. And the other combination for his father was that he was a Hollywood movie producer. Good combination to have. So he created, after his experience at Johns Hopkins, something called the Charlie Foundation. The Charlie Foundation really revolutionized the diet. It brought it sort of out of the darkness, so to speak, became extremely well looked at by different centers. And Jim, who was the father, got Meryl Streep to do a movie, really trying to get the word out. And it's probably no coincidence if you look in the medical literature, you can really stem it back to 1994, where things started taking off dramatically. And interestingly, if you look at foreign countries that outside the United States, they really started about 1996. So about 2 years after the Charlie Foundation is where a lot of the other countries started doing the diet as well. The third, I think, critical day that occurred was April 2nd, 2008, and that was the first day of a ketogenic diet conference. It was kind of hard to imagine back in 1994 that there would ever be a conference solely devoted to the ketogenic diet. Way hard to imagine we'd have all these people here to talk about the ketogenic diet. But in 2008, we actually got about 250 neurologists and dietitians together. We held a meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, which was incredibly successful, only on the ketogenic diet. Got a lot of national attention in the United States. Also in 2008, it was an exciting year. The British group, led by Helen Cross, published their results from a randomized controlled study. For many years, that was sort of seen as a negative to the ketogenic diet, that there were no randomized controlled trials. So they changed that and said, yes, there are. It does work. So that was an exciting time. And as well, that same year, we published what we call the consensus statement, where we got a lot of people together, neurologists, dietitians, that specialize in the ketogenic diet, and we said, this may be what we think is, for some situations, the ideal way to do the diet, and in some ways where there's flexibility. And so this was a nice achievement in the world of the ketogenic diet. A lot of different societies supported it and published it, so it's used as a general guide for the diet now. Now in 2012, it is available lots of places. I still get emails from families all over the world who say, I live in this country, ketogenic diet is not offered here, and I say that is so untrue. I said, here are 5 other centers in your country, and they didn't know that. All these countries here in gray are countries that offer the ketogenic diet, at least to my knowledge. There may be some that I don't know about. You can see that there are some areas in white that we're working on, we're trying to very hard. Central America, parts of Africa, some sections of Eastern Europe, and then Southeast Asia. I'll talk a little bit later after Zahava about some of our ideas to try to get to those regions that you may find interesting. When we talk to families, like themselves, and we sort of tell them as neurologists, we think you should go on the diet, this is sometimes what they think. They say, oh my gosh, they say butter, 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 we can't do that. And I think as well in 2012, things are different. This is actually a very nice coloring book that was drawn by one of my patients, almost as cute as our patients over there. But she did a very, very nice coloring book, and you can see all the nice foods on the ketogenic diet. She didn't think it was all butter. Not too bad. Maybe the banana I might have taken out, but otherwise it's pretty good. These are some photographs. I love to collect photographs from other countries of the ketogenic diet. Top left is ketogenic diet sushi from Japan. Top right was sort of all different snacks and pitas and ice cream, actually in the middle section. The bottom left was from Norway, and the bottom right was from Canada. So lots of different cultures, different countries doing the ketogenic diet. This was the work that Ellie and Tali have been working on for the ketogenic diet for Israel. Love to show that as well. I think it's pretty good. What's that? Yes. These are some of your things though, right? Your recipes. As well, we just recently, about 2 months ago, had 2 families that were religious Orthodox that came to us at Johns Hopkins, and they were very skeptical whether they could successfully do the diet. And I think with Zahava's creativity in our kitchen, we were able to make it work. We got them a separate refrigerator. The kitchen was made kosher to help them be on the diet, and it was a nice success. So lots of different ways for different countries, but also different religions that we can make the diet work. As well, probably about a third now of the children we take care of actually never see some of those foods. They're solely formula fed. Infants are probably the fastest growing population now that we see at Hopkins. A lot of children who have feeding tubes, and you can actually relatively easily use any of these different formulas. You can see here KetoCal, but there's also some Ketonia is from Korea. The one next to it is from Japan. I don't know what it says, but they tell me that that is Japanese for a keto formula. Lots of options available. As well, lots of great support groups like Oliver's Magic Diet. There's Matthew's Friends in the UK, Epilepsy Cure Initiative in Canada, and then the Carson Harris Foundation. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Carson a bit later, is out of Baltimore. The press, I know there's some members of the press here, which is great, always seems to find the diet very interesting. It can be dramatic and can be exciting. And I think it's nice as well to sort of show that parents can actually help their children with epilepsy as opposed to just following their doctor's orders. And so lots of articles that have been written, Time Magazine, New York Times, this was ABC News, they did a video interview. They like to show bacon, I don't know why. Bacon and elephants, but that's what they find dramatic, I think. We just had in 2010, which was where I met Ellie and Tali. Our second ketogenic diet conference was held in Edinburgh. A little bit colder than Phoenix, but a bit better single malt whiskey. A very good meeting. And so now in 2012, it is amazing how things have changed compared to even 1993 when the Charlie Foundation was formed. I think in the United States, it's pretty much everywhere where you can find the ketogenic diet. Almost every United States city has a keto center or sometimes multiple keto centers. We've had some discussion, there's some argument back and forth that maybe, in fact, there may be too many centers now in the United States. Centers that maybe should be referring to the bigger centers or trying to do it on their own with maybe 1 patient, 2 patients a year. So it's another topic maybe for another night. In general, when I hear from families that come see me, most of the time they say, you know, my neurologist said I don't do it here, but I'm happy to refer you to Johns Hopkins, or I'm happy to refer you to New York or Philadelphia. We actually queried our families before they came in and asked them to rank from 1 to 10 how supportive their neurologist was. Jim Abrams from the Charlie Foundation thought that the average was going to be a 1, and it turned out it was actually 7.9. So most parents said, you know, my neurologist was actually very supportive. It did take them a while, and we're still having 2-3 years before they're referred, but when they do decide to refer, they're usually very supportive. And again, about half of these parents gave these neurologists a 10 out of 10 in terms of their support. So things are changing, and I think the diet has become more mainstream now in the United States. So what Zahava and I will talk about tonight to kind of bring you up to speed on what is really changing. First, Zahava will speak first about sort of how we do the diet, what's our protocol, sort of how we do the ins and outs of starting children on the diet, how things have changed. I'll then follow with a bit of information about some of the less restrictive diets and new ideas to make the diet maybe equally effective, maybe a little easier to do, and sort of how we can expand that to other populations and countries. We'll talk about who we use it for as well. I'll talk about some of the indications and types of epilepsies that we know it works well for, and those who maybe it doesn't work as well for. Zahava will follow again with side effects and how we're not just knowing about the side effects, but trying to prevent them before they even happen. She'll talk as well about some new research about how we stop the diet, how we take children off the diet. And then lastly, I'll wrap up with maybe a little bit of futuristic science fiction ideas of trying to use the diet and where things are heading for things other than epilepsy. Kind of an exciting, very new world that we're moving into. So I'm pleased to introduce my partner, Zahava, who's a much better speaker than I am, knows much more than I do. And she'll talk to you about how we start the diet at Hopkins.
Hi. I wish I could have gone to like an ulpan beforehand and brush up on my Hebrew and give this lecture in Hebrew, but what I want to do is more of a practical, what we actually do at Hopkins, our protocol for starting the diet. We first meet as a team, and we have quite a nice team, which consists of the doctor, the dietitian, the pharmacist, the social worker, the coordinator, and anybody else who's involved in the actual admission of patients who are going to start on the ketogenic diet. These are patients who already have been approved by Dr. Kossoff and the doctors to start the diet. We review all the medical records, the family dynamics, if there's big issues with coming from different states. We have parents that come from all over. The goals, what medications they're on. Insurance is a big thing in America. If you're on a different insurance in Virginia versus your insurance in Baltimore, what can be accepted or not. So those are just logistical things that we have to take care of. And then we go through all labs, pre-diets. We check all the patients' fasting blood, their cholesterol, a urine sample, hopefully a metabolic workup has been done beforehand, and the doctors all look at the EEGs and the MRIs. And this is us preparing for the diet, and the nurse as well. I forgot to mention the nurse. But all of us just sitting there. And the point of this is really basically to go through. One child might be 3 years old and on a tube feed. One child might be 3 years old and walking around. Does one child get a 3-to-1 ratio, which I'll talk about? Does one child get a 4-to-1 ratio? It's not just, 3 years old, this amount, 4 years old, this amount. We really try to work out the calories and everything beforehand, before the diet is started. What I do before the diet is started, every single parent fills out a 3-day food record for me, so I know exactly what that patient is eating. It's very important because, again, I could just choose calories left and right, and that could be the wrong calorie for calories and fluid goals and everything for your patient, for your child. So I make sure everybody gives me a 3-day food record before starting the diet. And then as a dietitian, what I do is I look at those 3-day food records and I compare it to, in America we use something called the DRIs, the dietary reference intakes, and it's just a standard number. So if you weigh 10 kilos and you're under age 1, then you need 100 calories per kilo. That's where I start off with. And then these are just set numbers that are out there for all dietitians to use. And then I go from there. Is your child taking in more calories, less calories, and are they growing well, which is also huge. If I see a growth chart beforehand and the patient is really not growing well, my goal is to get them to grow, as well as do well in the ketogenic diet. I want to see appropriate growth. So one of the surprising things that we do is we give 100% of the calories that are that child needs. So if it's 1,000 calories, they get 1,000 calories. If it's 1,200 calories, 2,000 calories, whatever is needed per day, that's how many calories I give. We do not calorie restrict. So as parents who hear about the diet and who hear different things, the diet restricts the calories, we don't restrict. What we do, though, is, and this is an American diet, I don't know so much about the Israeli diet, our American kids have breakfast, then snack, and then they go to the cabinet and get another snack, and then they'll have lunch, and then they'll have snack, and then they'll go to the baseball game and have another snack, and then have dinner. So there's none of that. So that's restricted. It's here's your breakfast, breakfast. Here's your snack, that's your snack. So there's nothing in between, which we promote in our GI weight loss clinic, as opposed to, but that is the restriction, is that after breakfast, if your child asks for more, what we say is, I'm sorry, that's it, that's for breakfast, but that should be enough. For protein, it's very important for growth, for health. We meet that set number, whatever that number is for your child. That's the number we meet, and we have to adjust the calories or the ratio as needed. And same thing with fluid. I don't limit fluid intake, especially hot outside. If, let's say, the amount is 1,000 cc's per day, that's how much your child should get. Okay, again, I don't want to limit and we don't want to restrict. The goal is to, my goal, besides seizure freedom, is to promote appropriate growth. So the Hopkins protocol is we admit 4 families at one time. The admission is 4 days, and there's daily education, which I'll go through soon. We check blood glucose level and ketone levels while the patient's admitted. The 4 families at one time is very nice for the families. It's something that we're very lucky that we can do. At Hopkins, very few centers in America are lucky to do that, so I know it's not like that as well. But the families at least it's good for me as a dietitian to educate everybody at once, and it's good for the families to have a common bond and to talk. So how we typically do it is very slowly. Again, I told you it's from Monday to Thursday. We at Hopkins do a 24-hour fast with clear liquids, 0-calorie liquids. You know, it doesn't have to be clear; it could be Diet Coke. But 24-hour fast, and then we start at 1/3 of the calories. Then for 24 hours, then 2/3 of the goal calories, and then full strength all the time at the correct ratio that we set aside for that patient. And before the last night, and then breakfast and lunch before they go home, they're on their full meal if they're eating, and their full calorie strength if they're getting formula. Up until then, we either do an eggnog, which we do egg cream and oil, or we do the keto formula. So this is the education that we go through every single day. We go through different classes. We try to give breaks because it's a lot of information to take in. So on the first day, the doctor reviews what's going to happen that week, the side effects, the basics of the diet. So the parents know what they're getting themselves into. Most of our parents are very well read before starting the diet, but just to review it again. On the second day, it's all me. They get to hear me a lot. And again, I go through more of the basics of the diet, but a lot of the foods. And then in the afternoon, again, more food specific. Wednesday is a keto, we have a computer program that we teach all the families. There's a sick day lecture that's either given by the doctor or the nurse practitioner. And then we actually have a parent lecture where parents that have been on the ketogenic diet or currently have children on the ketogenic, parents that have children on the ketogenic diet come and speak to the families just one-on-one with us out of the room. And then on the last day, we do weighing and measuring foods. We actually weigh a meal on a scale, and then how to read the recipes, and then they go home after that class and after lunch. So it's a busy week. This is one of the classes. And this is the parent class, and it's very nice for the families to talk to other parents who are on the ketogenic diet, or who have gone through with kids on the ketogenic diet.